If you want a simple opening for white with a clear attacking plan, this system is for you. Now I want to show you a really cool game played by Fabiano Caruana where he illustrates the opening setup and also the following attacking plan. He's playing white here against Aryan Tari, who is a Norwegian champion and also a friend of Carlsen. Therefore, that's already put psychological pressure on Caruana. He's got to be careful, not messing up with Carlsen's friend. But more seriously, he puts the bishop right here, which targets black's future castling. That's the first step of this plan. Black continues with c5, and at this point white continues with pawn to b3, which is a nice and multi-purpose move. At first, that prepares a development of the second bishop on an adjacent diagonal where these two monsters will be putting long-term pressure on your opponent's king. But also, simultaneously, this pawn controls the square c4, making it impossible for black to push the pawn forward and to chase away your bishop. So pawn to b3, black continues with the development, white castles, bishop d6, bishop b2. The really nice thing about this whole setup is that you can play it against whatever your opponent plays, and that's a big advantage. And by the way, later in the video, I will show you different ways to handle if your opponent tries to deviate from the script, if he's playing the king's Indian defense or tries to develop the bishop somewhere here. I'll address all these usual questions that students ask me, but for now let's just observe the main setup. All right, black castles, white continues with the knight development to d2. Again, we don't put it right here because we do not want to obstruct our own bishop. We want these two bishops to be very active along these diagonals. Now black needs to develop this light square bishop. He plays b6, and the initial setup is over for white, right? You developed your pieces, your castle. What are you going to do next? That's another big advantage of the system. You have a clear attacking plan. Caruana moves his knight forward to e5, and that's the first step of your attacking plan. From here, the knight is gonna exert this long-term pressure over your opponent's position, and it's pretty annoying for black, because at first it looks like, well, the black can just trade it off. But it's not that simple, because taking that way is just a straightforward blunder, because here you have a double attack against these two pieces, and your opponent is supported, which means that black is going to just lose one of his pieces. That's totally bad for black. But even if black captures instead with the bishop, that's still pretty bad, because now the knight is attacked, and it has no good squares to go to. It has to retreat back because all the squares forward are controlled by you. These ones are controlled by your queen, and this central square is controlled by your bishop and knight. Therefore, black cannot jump over there as well, which means that the knight will have to retreat, which is only good for you. And therefore, this exchange, we'll talk about this in the future, but generally it only favors you. And in the actual game, black noticed that this knight is hanging, and he played bishop b7 to defend the knight. But now it goes pawn f4, getting this really strong so-called Pillsbury knight. This outpost knight on e5, solidified by your two pawns from here, and this whole construction is again super annoying for your opponent, and very difficult for your opponent to get rid of this situation. In the future, if black ever wants to take on e5, now it's going to be even worse, because not only this pawn comes forward and chases away this knight, but now also your rook gets into play and will help your future attack. Black refused to take the knight and instead activated the rook, and now that's a very important moment for white. Here Caruana played a3, this little move which makes a lot of sense. It secures this square, and otherwise black could have played knight to b4, attacking the bishop, and with this knight right here, I'll put it here for a second. Of course, he cannot play right there because white would simply capture it, but that just shows the importance of having the pawn right here, because if the pawn is not there, then the knight from here would put pressure here, and also to your pawn from c2, which together with this rook pressure, you see, is becoming quite annoying, and that's why you gotta have the pawn right here and make this move impossible for black. This is exactly what Caruana played. Now, the knight got really upset that it can't go forward and got depressed and went down to e7. And now Fabiano played another nice move, queen f3. That's another beauty of having this pawn right here on f4. It allows different kind of lifts of your heavy pieces to the king side, whether it's the queen or the rook. You can lift it to the king side, and now your heavy pieces, your queen and rooks, your heavyweights, start taking part in your attack. Besides that, of course, you can reroute the queen somewhere here and take aim at the opponent's king. There's also a little bit of a prophylactic meaning behind this move as well. It adds one more control over the square e4, making it impossible for the black knight to jump there, which potentially was something black was hoping for. While retreating the knight, he opened up this diagonal for the bishop, and maybe he was hoping to land the knight right there. But now he cannot do this because you have three attackers that control this square. Okay, black goes rook to c7, setting up a very, very nice trap, which white's got to be careful. But fortunately for Caruana, I mean, Probably he saw the trap, but even without seeing it, his next move is the right one anyway. He played queen to h3, adding the queen to the attack. But what's the point of rook c7? First looks just meaningless. The point is, if white is careless, let's say white just plays whatever casual move, there is potential for c4 break. And this is a little tactical trick that you gotta be aware of. And the idea here is, after the recapture, there could be this potential discovered attack of your queen, and also this attack of your bishop. So that was probably something black was hoping for, but in reality, it's all useless to be honest, because the queen was anyway on the way to the kingside, and Caruana just played queen h3. Now this pressure is already something black really needs to be concerned about. Right now there is no direct threat of a checkmate, queen takes h7 because of this knight guarding the square, but anyway, something's in the air. Because of that, black is desperately seeking counterplay on the queen side, trying to push those pawns forward and chase away white's bishops, but Caruana trades on c5, thus opening up a diagonal for his dark square bishop, and then lands this kamikaze knight on c6. What is going on right here? The knight is just getting out of control. But the idea here is that in this Colle-Zukertort system, you've got these two really great bishops pointing toward the king. And now with the queen also getting involved, you see that it becomes really dangerous. And Caruana basically just wanted to get rid of this knight to open up this diagonal, and now once the knight is captured, then bishop takes f6, eliminates the final defender of black's king, and now queen takes h7 checkmate is coming, and if black tries to just play g6, then he avoids a checkmate temporarily, but all these dark squares around his king are terribly weak. We're always going to penetrate and do something like this. Also, this knight is pinned. Black potentially would wish to move the knight away somewhere to f5, but he cannot do this right now because it's pinned. And if black says, okay, let me unpin the knight and then play something like this, then there is queen takes h7, boom. And by the way, some people say that this whole system should be called Rubinstein system, but for me, if you play like this, you can even call it Rammstein, because it's really brutal. Now let me show you the most played line by black. This is what you're most likely to encounter. Black goes c5, and from here, by the way, also just to confirm the name of the opening. So here there is c3 line, which is a different system. It's called the Colle system. But there is also this b3 where you're aiming to fianchetto your queenside bishop, which is more aggressive, and this is called Zukertort system, or sometimes Colle-Zukertort system. But if you play it on a Facebook Messenger, they call it Zuckerberg system. And by the way, recently he also claimed that the alien gambit was named after him. But more seriously, getting back to our system, you develop your bishop, and now most of your opponents will actually trade on d4, which is only good for you. Why? Because down the line, you will be able to put your rook right here and activate it very easily, or to put your queen right here, and also you have even more freedom for your pieces, while black gained nothing from this trade. That's the beauty of to take as a mistake principle, right? Alright, black castles, you go knight to d2, you're still sticking to your system. Rook e8, that's another move which your opponents will often play, which generally speaking makes a lot of sense, but in this case just does not work, and it's another step in the wrong direction. Now, what's the idea behind rook e8? It's pretty clear. Black wants to break open the center with pawn to e5, which will also open the diagonal for his bishop and make his position overall much more active. But it doesn't work in this case for many reasons. First of all, you could easily play a symmetric move rook e1 and take a very strong grasp of this square, but you don't even need that because you've got knight e5, the move which you were going to play anyway, just to transition into your middle game attack. And now this knight starts dominating the position. If black ever trades on e5, then that's usually, in most cases, another mistake, because after this, your pawn advances forward and chases away this knight. Since you control these squares, where this knight could possibly go to, it has to retreat backwards. Now this whole position is absolutely clumsy and totally passive, which is great for you. Now, what do you do here? You completed your development, you castled, you developed your minor pieces, which means that it's the beginning of the middle game stage. And the right way to go about the middle game is to start moving forward, preferably to your opponent's side of the board, and make threats. So if you want to make a forward move which creates a threat, what would you play here? I mean, there is a move f4, which we talked about before, solidifying this pawn and potentially gaining some space, and that's fine. But if I want to create a threat and move to opponent's side of the board, then the move which comes to my mind is queen h5, which does both of these things. By the way, you see how easy it is to come up with middle game plans if you have a clear guideline. By the way, if you're interested in that, I go deeper in this in my free masterclass, I'll link it below, you can check it later. But for now, let's stick to the opening theme. Like goes g6, what do you do now with the queen? Of course, go inside with queen h6, potentially looking at all these weaknesses. And now the situation becomes really annoying for black. Maybe you want to reroute your knight somewhere here, and if you can make it happen, you see that the checkmate is pretty quick. Or maybe you can reroute your rook somewhere there, also very annoying. Or maybe put the pawn to f4. And if they capture this hanging pawn on e5, thinking that you overlooked it, then you continue with f4. And after the knight moves anywhere, doesn't really matter. Let's say he trades, expect you to recapture. Then they just overlook this sniper bishop sitting in an ambush, and that's a checkmate. Let me show you something else which at times is really useful. You know your system, but you can get there via different move order. For example, I often love playing knight f3 and then b3 and bishop b2 first and then transitioning into the system. In this game, he even started with the move pawn to e3, totally hiding his intent. And then after a couple moves, he starts to gradually build up the system, black plays something, and now you can see that it got back on track. Now we got the classical Zukertort system. Black continues with knight to c6, white castles, knight to d2, so far it's all standard. Black develops, knight to e5, white transitions into the attack, black trades, but now this knight is attacked. And here queen g4. Another useful moment here, we saw previously that you could play pawn f4, gaining space on the king side, and after that, lift either your queen or your rook there, to the king side. But also you can see that sometimes you can do that right away by throwing the queen out of there to h5 or g4. That is also totally fine. This pawn on e5 is already guarded by the bishop, therefore you don't have to worry about this. Black played pawn to a6. He's trying to get some counterplay on the queen side. And by the way, you see that the big advantage for you here is that you have this clear, straightforward attack and middle game plan. Your opponents are usually clueless. They're trying to put together something, but it's too slow and ineffective. And by the way, I think Zukertort means something like sugar pie, translated from German. And indeed, it's going to be a piece of cake for you. f4, white is already launching the kingside attack, making room for the rook, and maybe trying to break open the position with f5. Black tries to slow it down, but white ignores it and launches the attack anyway. Now rook takes f5, taking advantage of the pin. b5, black is still trying to create some counterplay, but now rook to f1. Now this pressure is really strong. Maybe white wants to play e6. Queen b6, black is trying to consolidate everything, but rook h5, totally abusing this pin, and also suddenly attacking this knight on d7. Black played bishop c8, again hoping for some discovered attacks, but here comes rook takes h7. A sudden rook sacrifice, king takes, now pawn to e6, opening up a diagonal for the bishop. Queen captures, and by the way, a puzzle a day keeps losses away. If you can find the winning move for white, please write it down in comments below. And I know you may have this question, what if black develops his bishop either to f5 or to g4, trying to disrupt your system? What are you going to do then? Well, luckily it is not the most played move by black, but nevertheless in about 1/3 of your games, you're going to experience black developing the bishop here or here. Now, the issue is, of course, you could stick to your usual setup, but it's slightly less efficient. Indeed, this bishop on g4 is annoying. And what I recommend instead is that you change your plan and you try to hit where it hurts. Black weakened his queen side because there is no light score bishop there anymore, and you can transition into something closer to the usual queen's gambit, and you start striking and attacking these light score weaknesses on the queen side. Now you want to hit the pawn and also the rook, and overall this queen side is weakened. Black of course thinks, okay, I'll simply play b6. But now you see that your queen also sidestepped this pin, and now you can go knight e5, and instead of being attacked by the bishop, now it goes the other way around. You put pressure to the bishop. He retreats back, and now you keep exploiting these light score weaknesses. And it doesn't seem like a major issue, but it's already kind of annoying. Your knight and bishop controls all these squares, and he goes knight to d7, and now you suddenly play pawn to e4, and that move wins the game. Now, it's a very paradoxical situation where you totally turn things around. And of course, it looks like black controlled this square so many times. How could you possibly move the pawn there? But it's not that simple. For example, capturing with a pawn just leads to this sudden checkmate. Of course, black instead should capture this pawn with either his knight or bishop, but the issue that black experiences is he's already under quite strong pressure of all your pieces putting together a massive attack right here. And therefore, removing any of his defender will only make it worse. Plus, on top of this, you can now add one more pin, and you totally overpinned black left and right. Now, something like bishop takes d7 is coming because the other knight is pinned. Even if black tries to cover, you still just trade off the defender. This knight is still pinned, you capture it. Your tricky knight, by the way, prevents black from castling. And otherwise, if black tries whatever, you can even make another sudden check. You keep erasing black's pieces one by one. Now the king is under double check, then you capture this bishop on e4, and black is just losing all his warriors. Moving on to the next and also very annoying counter to the system is the King's Indian defense, where black fianchettos the kingside bishop and then goes pawn d6. It's a very popular opening, therefore you're definitely going to encounter it. Now here's the deal. If you stick to your usual plan, of course you could possibly do this, but the issue is your following middle game plan is no longer that effective. Your knight can no longer jump to e5 because of his pawn. This bishop is not as active because these pawns barricade the diagonal, and there's nothing wrong here, but again, you don't have that usual great attack and middle game plan. That's why against the King's Indian, I recommend another setup, which I found to be super effective and super annoying against beginner to intermediate level opponents. It is when you play c4 and then you continue with the move bishop f4. Now, it's a very nice move because we know that in the King's Indian, they wish to play d6 and e5. You start countering that right away. What's really annoying for black in this setup, now you can also play h3, taking away this g4 square so that he cannot potentially develop the bishop there, and also you prepare this escape square for the bishop just in case. If he ever wants to attack it, let's say, you can always just retreat. And now your opponent will wish to somehow prepare this move. He cannot play right away because you have 3 pieces attacking it, therefore black needs to provide equal number of defenders, and he'll usually develop the knight either here or here, in most cases here, but it doesn't even matter because your moves are always the same. You play e3, also having your center very, very solid, meaning your opponent have no attack here whatsoever. Now, he still cannot play this move because he's got 2 defenders and he needs 3. He goes rook e8 to prepare this central break. You go bishop e2, and what's great here is that this move e5 looks really great for black, but it's a blunder. But if he doesn't play, then what can he play? He's just ending up with this passive position, no clear plan, and it's certainly not what black was hoping for in the King's Indian defense. But if he goes e5, which is the most played move and a very common mistake, because it looks like black has prepared this move really well and now is hitting your bishop, but you just capture this pawn. That's the trick. It looks like you're losing a piece after the exchange, but it's not the case because you first trade off queens on d8. This is what your opponent overlooked. This deflects the rook from this position where it used to guard the knight, but after the trade, that's no longer the case. You just recapture, and now you've won that pawn on e5. You're attacking another pawn on c7. You also restrict this fianchettoed bishop, and you have totally dominant, it's technically winning position. Now, if you want to go deeper into middle game planning, my free masterclass is linked somewhere here and in the description. And if you want to know Capablanca's rules of positional play, you may like this video.